Welcome to the New York Botanical Garden. I'm Ursula Chance, Director of Bronx Green Up and Community Horticulture. We are honored to host this conversation and to be part of the Not 62 campaign and larger food justice movement. Today, we're here at a fitting location for the subject at hand, NYBG's Edible Academy, a teaching garden where children of all ages learn to grow, harvest, prepare, and eat healthy fruit and vegetables. The Edible Academy serves more than 100,000 people from across New York City each year. The Edible Academy has also been a part of the Bronx Community Farm Hubs, a program we developed with our partners in the Bronx in response to COVID-19. Edible Academy staff have grown and distributed almost 6,000 pounds of fruit and vegetables directly to the Bronx community and produced more than 10,000 vegetable seedlings for the 18 community gardens and urban farms that make up the Bronx Community Farm Hubs. We want to thank the Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. for his tireless work on behalf of the Bronx, particularly on the subject of food justice. We would also like to thank our partners, Montefiore Health System and the Not 62 Steering Committee, and our panelists, Dennis Derrick, Frankie Pimentel, Mike Hurwitz, Frank Malte, and Gladys Roman. We join everyone in celebrating the dedication and vision of our keynote, Karen Washington. A leader of the food justice movement in New York and a trustee of NYBG. And before I close, thank you to all of you who are joining our event live this morning. Now, please join me in welcoming the Bronx Borough President, Ruben Diaz Jr.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone here present, physically present. I want to thank the New York Botanical Garden for hosting us in what I call the Garden of Eden in God's country, the Boogie Down Bronx. To be here at the Edible Academy always warms my heart with joy. I was here a couple of weeks ago, touring with the Lieutenant Governor of the state of New York. I remember when this was sort of a mini concept. And year after year, our office has been dedicated and instrumental in making sure that the resources are here so that not only we have a beautiful garden, but that children from the Bronx and from all over the city and beyond, as well as families, come here and learn about growing your own garden and your own food and your own vegetables. I want to thank the Not 62 Steering Committee from my team. My team today, Dr. Nancy Keck, who is the Director of Health Services out of the Borough President's Office. Special note of gratitude to Montefiore, as well as their representative here, Melissa Cebollero, who worked at the Bronx Borough President's Office and started the whole idea of hashtag Not 62. Hashtag Not 62 doesn't mean anything, it has nothing to do with your age. For those of you who have tuned in, and I want to thank each and every single one of you for tuning in. This Not 62 means that there are 62 counties in the state of New York. And unfortunately, at least since I've been the borough president, there's always a report every year on health indicators and health disparities. And we've been number 62, which means, yes, that we're in last place. That's the bad news. The good news is that working collaboratively with healthcare institutions like Malte, working with the steering committee, working with institutions like the Botanical Garden and so many of you, and I'll get to Karen and our community gardens in a minute. The good news is that every year when you compare the Bronx to ourselves, we're getting healthier. But we still have a long way to go. And today is Food Justice Day. And what does that mean exactly? It means that each and every single one of us, as individuals, as members of our families, as community leaders, have to do the best that we can to take care and be our brothers and our sisters' keeper. And the one way to do it is to ensure that we are knowledgeable and educated in what we put into our bodies. I'm a victim, I'm guilty of not always adhering to that. But throughout the years, as so many of you have informed me, throughout the years, getting ideas with so many of you who are here and so many who are tuning in this morning. My wife and I have transformed our bodies. We've eaten better. We have provided some of our favorite meals as Puerto Ricans without compromising our palate. And that is important. It means that you can still have the things that you love, but you can sweeten it with natural things and not sugar, or you can add a little spice to it in a way where it tastes the same, but you don't have the preservatives, you don't have the things that your body cannot break down that ultimately cause health issues. Which brings me to today. Today is about a celebration of community gardens and so many of you. When we speak of food justice, that means so many things. And I'm so happy and proud that today's conversation and the panelists are going to cover at least a broad band of those different issues and the complexities of this topic. But during COVID, over the last 6, 7, 8, 9 months, we were hit pretty hard, not only in New York City, but the Bronx was the eye of the storm that hit our city and our state. We lost a lot of lives, and my condolences to any of you who have lost a loved one, a neighbor, a family member, a colleague, as I have, and my family has. We have seen a lot of sickness. There's been a lot of anxiety, especially around economic development and job displacement. And so with that job displacement, the biggest anxiety that I see on a daily basis in the Bronx has been food insecurity. And so I want to thank all of the community gardens for stepping it up during these trying times. I want to thank you for feeding Bronxites and New Yorkers. I want to thank you for teaching individuals like my sister-in-law, Rosemary, and my brother, Sammy. Sammy is growing peppers and eggplant on his balcony. Maybe his landlord won't like that. But he's growing them in the balcony. My sister-in-law has given us green peppers and everything that we're able to chop up and feed. And she's doing that right in her small little backyard in the Soundview section of the Bronx. This is what we've learned. We have to be self-subsistent. We have to take care of each other. But even more so, I want to thank people like Karen Washington that you'll hear from today, and so many of you. When Community Gardens was first initiated, this is when nobody wanted any parts to do with the South Bronx and the Boogie Down Bronx. And this is our way of trying to at least beautify abandoned lots. And when I say that this is God's country, it's because it's not a joke, it's not a pun, it's because God's work happens here every day, and it's been happening since the 70s and the 80s, where you take rubble and abandoned lots and an ugly piece of property, and you created a miracle, that you grew not only fruits and vegetables, but you gave nurture, you nurtured and nourishment to the souls and the spirit of the people of the Bronx. And that's critically important. And then lo and behold, wow, today is the cool thing to do. So as the borough president, I just want to say I'm so proud to be here. I commend each and every single one of you. I'll be proclaiming today as Food Justice Day in the Bronx, and you'll see that in a minute. But I'm so delighted that, more importantly, that this conversation, that the expertise and the information that you are all going to receive today, I'm hopeful that it's going to become contagious. I'm hopeful that you're going to take this and do all that you can to make yourselves healthier, so that you can build up your immune system, so that you can take care of your families, and then ultimately you can take that knowledge and take care of your brothers and your sisters here in the Boogie Down Bronx. Thank you, God bless, and see you soon.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Maria Ociello from Fidelis Care Health Insurance. First and foremost, I would like to thank the New York Botanical Garden for safely hosting us today at this beautiful Bronx garden. I would also like to thank the Bronx Borough President, Ruben Diaz Jr., for proclaiming October 17th as Bronx Food Justice Day and convening this webinar in conjunction with the hashtag Not62 Committee. As mentioned by the Bronx Borough President, since 2009, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation County Health Ranking Report has ranked the Bronx as 62 out of New York State's 62 counties in terms of health outcomes. In response to this, several groups have come together to build a collaborative effort with community partners and Bronx residents to improve the health of the borough. These efforts have been spearheaded by dedicated partners such as the Bronx Borough President's Office, the Institute for Family Health, Bronx Health Reach, Montefiore Health Systems, the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene's Center for Health Equity and Community Wellness. And I and Fidelis Care are happy and honored to say that we have been part of this committee for the last 5 years. The mission of the collaborative is to partner across multiple sectors in the Bronx and address the social and economic conditions that impact the overall quality of life, and help create an environment where Bronx residents can attain their highest level of health. This group meets regularly, sets goals, evaluates outcomes, and celebrates accomplishments, such as our upcoming 5th anniversary of #Not62, the campaign for a healthy Bronx. More so than ever, this work is important. Over the past few months, COVID-19 has wreaked havoc on our communities, on public health, on economic stability, and most importantly, food access. Millions of children, adults, and seniors are experiencing food hardships today. That is why we are recognizing the great work happening in the Bronx around food access. People, organizations, companies are all coming together to make sure our communities not only have access to food, but access to fresh food. We know it is so important to continue educating the community on these issues and alerting them to the resources available today and every day in the Bronx. With that said, I am honored to introduce our keynote speaker, Karen Washington, or as others like to call her, Mama K. Karen is a farmer and community activist, striving to make New York City a better place. As a community gardener and a board member of the New York Botanical Gardens, she's worked throughout the Bronx, turning empty lots into community gardens. As advocate and former president of the New York City Community Garden Coalition, she stood up and spoke out for garden protection and preservation. As a member of La Familia Verde Garden Coalition, she's helped launch a city farmers market bringing fresh vegetables to the Bronx community. Not only is Karen dedicated to advocating and developing gardens, but she's committed to education. She is also a board member of Farm School NYC, where she leads workshops on growing food and food justice across the country. Soul Fire Farm, an organization committed to undoing racism and injustice within the food system, and Why Hunger, a grassroots organization aimed at ending hunger. Karen knows changing narrative is key. In 2010, she co-founded Black Urban Growers, an organization supporting growers in both urban and rural settings. And most recently, in 2019, she co-founded Black Farmer Fund, aimed at supporting Black farmers and businesses with capital and resources in New York State. Throughout her years of work, she has been awarded for her love and commitment to growing. In 2012, Ebony Magazine voted her one of their 100 most influential African Americans in the country. And in 2014, she was the recipient of the prestigious James Beard Foundation Award. Karen, we are very honored to have you here today as our keynote speaker.
Well, thank you all for having me. As many of you know, I sort of speak off key, but this time I'm going to make sure that I get things right to do the proper introduction. First of all, I want to thank the Borough President's Office for naming this Food Justice Day. So what is food justice? Food justice is about eliminating the disparities and inequities we see in the food system. I also want to thank Montefiore, the Not62 campaign, the New York Botanical Garden and Bronx Green Up, and of course, the Bronx Community Gardens. I never thought growing up as a little Black girl in New York City that I'll be standing here before you as a farmer. Moving from Manhattan to the Bronx changed my life, and so did a tomato. Because back in the day, I hated tomatoes. But when I moved to the Bronx, I had a huge backyard, and I wanted to grow 3 items. I wanted to grow a tomato because it was pale in this grocery store, came in a cellophane package. I wanted to grow eggplant because the eggplant sounded funky. And of course, I wanted to grow collard greens. So I had no experience whatsoever in terms of growing. I put that seed in the ground, nurtured that plant, and found out, wow, a tomato grows on a vine. My relationship to a tomato that was grown in a supermarket. And then it was red. And then when I picked that tomato and I bit into it, the juices were flowing and I could feel life within my body. And I was hooked. And I wanted to grow everything from pineapples and guava, but realized I really couldn't grow those things. But I went from my backyard to my front yard and to an empty lot. And when I learned that the food system was impacting so many social issues in my garden, I decided to do something about it. You know, the history of the New York City Community Garden Coalition and movement dates back to the early 1970s and 80s, starting from the Lower East Side to burnt down buildings in Brooklyn, Manhattan, and the Bronx. And those who could move because of power and privilege left. We call it white flight. But those who were left behind were strong, resilient, and powerful people turning empty lots into community gardens. But folks, initially, it wasn't about food. It was about beautification and survival. The people in the Bronx rose up to challenge and protect their community and their culture. The Afro-Latino culture that permeates the sights, the sounds, the smells, emanating from gardens full of joy and laughter, fun, and of course, food. Did you know the casitas, the little houses that you see in our community gardens, were found in Puerto Rico, are now in the Smithsonian Institute. Yet with limited resources and sweat equity, we were forced to grow food that we could not find in our grocery stores or was too expensive. Food that was culturally appropriate, such as popolo, popiche, cilantro, tomatillas, and of course for me, collards and turnips and kale. We would sit around and hear the stories of our grandfathers and grandmothers, abuelo, abuela, and they would tell stories about how it was growing food back home. And when you would sit back and just listen to them tentatively about the harvest and about running around catching a chicken for the meal. There was a strong relationship to nature that was loving and healing. And if you wanted some advice on how to grow food, they would tell you, do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of attitude, a little bit of luck, and sometimes a little prayer. They will tell you, yes, farming is hard and life is hard, but that was the hard work that they were doing. But at the end of the day, it was the love of the land. Many have transferred what we learned from our elders back into our community gardens. You know, they also call community gardens the lungs of the city, but we're much more than that. We're a safe haven for our seniors and our children. It's an open learning experience where you learn how to grow things, how things die and how things live. It's compost as nature balances the soil of the living and the soil of dead matter. How a leaf or a root of a plant can heal and have medicinal properties. How the bark of a tree can grow mushrooms and the tiniest bud can turn into fruit. And if you're lucky to have chickens and bees, whoa, that's taking you to another level. Because now you're introduced to animal husbandry and how the food chain works, how humans and animals and plants are all interrelated. Did anyone know that at one time the health department deemed bees as ferocious animals? And it was the community gardens that said, without bees, you don't have food. which is why I don't understand sometimes the politics of food. And when time and time again, gardens are pit up against development, why doesn't the city see the collective power of people gathering together, preserving a healing space, a space in communities of color, unless it's because communities of color are challenging their power? The same folks that are fighting to feed their families are the same folks that are fighting for a decent place to live. And the politics of food undermines the fact that healthy food, clean water, and shelter are basic human rights. We are at a pivotal point in our lives today. People more than ever understand that food is medicine. Because of COVID and its effect on people of color, especially in the Bronx, people want food that is fresh, that is local, that is healthy. They want to be able to afford food that is nourishing. We have seen an increase in people wanting to grow their own food, transferring front yards and lawns into edible gardens. People more than ever want to know that it's healthy to eat great food. Seed companies have been overwhelmed by the demand. While all this was playing out, what did community gardens in the Bronx do? In defiance of the rhetoric of us standing by and doing nothing, we reached out to New York Botanical Garden Bronx Green Up program to assist us in growing more food in our Bronx gardens. We came together during the height of the pandemic and laid out a plan to feed our communities. We reached out to the health department to ask for a webinar on COVID protocol to grow safely. We designed a plan on which gardens could grow what they want to grow and ask what resources they were needed. We met each and every week to make sure that we were growing food, but more importantly, that we were supporting each other. The money and resources that we got, we shared equally. When asked to do something, the Bronx Community Gardens stepped up with pop-up farm stands, CSAs, farmers market, and food distribution sites, all along following the guidelines to protect our community. We even took it one step further, partnering with local food pantries to donate our produce. I am so proud to be a Bronx farmer and gardener. When the city told us what we could not do, we did as Bronxites do. We said, yes, we can. COVID has shown who the essential workers are. Alongside the grocery workers, the bodegas, we too, as community gardens, consider ourselves as essential workers. Even as I stand here today before you, we continue to grow food for our community. A shout out must go out to our Bronx food pantries, soup kitchens, farmers markets, bodegas, grocery stores, all who have worked tirelessly to feed our community. It was never about who could do it better, but it was about being Bronx strong and stepping up to the plate, making sure no one was hungry. So when we celebrate Food Justice Day, let's be willing to come together to fight the injustices we see and to fight to end hunger and poverty. I am just one person trying to make a difference in my neighborhood. I have seen hunger. I have seen poverty. I have seen displacement, but I've also seen compassion, empathy, resiliency, hope, strength, and most of all, devotion. Too often, this borough does not get its just due. I saw how plain, ordinary people stepped up to do extraordinary work, making sure that our people, the people of the Bronx, were fed. Long live the Bronx, viva el Bronx. Thank you. Melissa?
Good morning. Thank you, Karen, for those inspirational words. We could not be prouder to have your partnership on the hashtag Not 60s to Steering Committee, and could not be happier that you moved to the Bronx from Manhattan. I welcome to this gorgeous location in the Edible Academy at the New York Botanical Garden. I'm honored to serve as the moderator for our distinguished panel. Now that we've heard a bit about the history of food security in this borough, we now have the pleasure of hearing from individuals that represent each of the food distribution systems in our city, and they will each talk about a little bit of the work that they do, explore the impact that COVID has had on their business model, and really, more importantly, speak about the future. How will we continue to address food security in this borough? The first panelist that I'm honored to introduce is Dennis Derrick, founder and president of the Corbin Hill Food Project, a Harlem-based nonprofit organization, but more importantly, a social enterprise whose mission is simply put, to supply fresh food to those who need it. This organization is committed to social justice, racial equity, and food sovereignty, believing that access to fresh, affordable food is a basic human right available to all. Without further ado, Mr. Dennis Derrick.
Thank you, and thank the borough president for hosting this whole event. And it's hard to follow Mama Kay. And it's interesting because 10 years ago, when she held the first Bugs conference, was when Corbin Hill was founded. And I went to that Bronx conference, and I was totally inspired to know that the $750,000 that was put up, 72% of it was put up by Blacks and Latinos. I say Latinas because there were no Latinos, they were all female Latinx groups, that at that particular point, we weren't just insane. It didn't matter the fact that all 11 of us had no experience in farming, but we also knew there was something fundamentally wrong, and we could not accept the assumptions of what was going on with food. We called ourselves deliberately a farm share, whereas people talked about a CSA. Well, this was fundamental to us because from day one, we've always thought that the community was not to own just simply a part of the produce, which is what you get in a CSA, but they needed to own the farm. And so 10 years later, we're in the process right now of transferring the ownership of that 95 acres to Black farmers. This is really unique. It's a form of, as I call it, it's a different form of reparations, okay? In which we as a group, 72% of us being Black and Latinx, and 64% of us being immigrants, kind of reflect what the communities we live in. And so we became a very different kind of distribution model. We would describe ourselves as a subscription model in which you sign up 1 week in advance, you can put your share on hold, you can join anytime. What we were doing fundamentally that was very different from a CSA is we were giving low-income folks choices. We never give individuals of low-income choices. And so this is our entire model. They could make the decisions when they wanted to. If they were running out of SNAP, they could put their share on hold and they could come back the next week. And so it was a kind of a very flexible model. And in our history of marketing, as we deal with it, we do not think of ourselves as marketing. We view ourselves as co-creating relationships with the institutions we work and co-creating relationships with the individuals in our community. So that our marketing concept is, if we can't co-create, you need to own it and you need to run it. And if you don't own it, it's not sustainable. And so that's very different from saying, passing out flyers, join this or join that. All right, the other thing I'm proud of is, guess where our first sites were? In the Bronx. And we are still in the Bronx. 10 years ago, our first site was a Children's Alliance in the Bronx. And those 11 organizations, and we've been at Lehman College, we've been at Brooklyn, Bronx Reach, we are at the Veterans Hospital, we're at Common Pantry in the Bronx. So even though we might be Manhattan-based, we're very much Bronx-based. Okay, so I want to know there's that relationship. The other piece around COVID is that we had 19 sites that served some 700 people at the time that COVID, the city was shut down. Within 2 days, 17 of our 19 sites were shut down and only 2 existed. We eventually, that week, we found ourselves losing 80% of our revenues and 80% of our customers. However, we're very entrepreneurial. And my staff said to me, well, what are we going to do? I says, well, every single situation, whether you like it or not, is an opportunity. And that's the only way you think about it. And that means that there's an opportunity that more people, from 1 million to 2 million people in this city, were going to be food insecure. It gave us an opportunity to say, how can we then reach out to be able to serve that larger number of people? And so we divided that into 2 sets. One is we went back to the institutions and said, you can't close down now. Now is a time of need. Let's work together and co-create programs to get there. And so we had a number of institutions that came to the forefront and worked with us in terms of doing that. The second aspect of us is that we're a mixed income model, so that we knew where our, well, we had 2 sites where we knew it's all middle class. We knew eating habits, cooking habits, purchasing habits would change, and we turned those distribution sites into mini markets. And quite frankly, I hate to say, they're extremely profitable because people were spending more time at home. As a matter of fact, if anybody could tell me how I can find pounds of yeast, because everybody's into baking, I would love to find it, because it's one of those few things that we have not been able to carry. All right, let's go to food justice and make me, so we adapted, we came to pre-packing and we had all additional expenses. But here's what we uniquely did. We also got a contract from the city. But it is not enough to simply get a contract from the city and simply purchase food. As Karen will tell you, we have 139 Black farmers in the city, in the state of New York out of 57,000. And so finding, in terms of the food chain, how do we be not only consumers in this community, but become economic citizens and participate in this kind of structure? So one of the things we did is all our pre-packing was done by Brooklyn Packers, a Black co-op, in which they got 18% of every dollar that we got from the city, not just for wages, because these were essential workers, but not just for wages, but to share in the profits of that group. And this is what I mean about becoming part of the economic, of this industry, of this food industry of $42 billion in the state of New York, in which we are just trivial. Let me just talk about food justice. And I think we could talk much longer about it in terms of when we get into the panel sections. It's not just about nutritious food. And I think all of us think it is. And I think it's a beginning point. It's creating a racially just and equitable system, which we do not have. It is beyond simply counting the number of pounds of food we deliver in a community in which, within our community, independent of the thousands of pounds, not just in this community, but any community in the 5 boroughs of New York, you will find that the outcomes are not the same. The health outcomes are not the same. So food in and of itself doesn't mean much. It is also beyond, we have to shift those measures. And then one final point, because I know we have a number of folks here, and that is we have to talk about shifting power. We can no longer accept the fact that simply we consult our residents, or we can no longer talk about the fact that we consult with the community. What we're asking you is to shift power, and the decisions have to be made by the residents and the community itself. That's true shifting of power. And I'll end with one little example of that. There's a 10-year study just done of 301 different food policies in the city of New York that was put out by the CUNY Food Policy Center. And of those 301 different food policies that were funded, one should note that the needle has not changed on anything over those 10 years around obesity or whatever measure you want to put. And it's not just in the Bronx, we're talking about the city. And what is absent from all those 301 policies? The communities never own the decision. And I would say to you that food justice begins not only in terms of ownership of land, but ownership of decisions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. Now that we've explored the farm share system of food access, I'd like to now transition to farmers markets. And we have Mike Hurwitz, who is the Director of Green Markets for Grow NYC, a decades-long program that has founded markets throughout the 5 boroughs, including the wholesale market at the Hunts Point market in the Bronx. And his work involves creating youth markets, helping to educate the next generation of farmers and market operators. And we're honored to have Mike with us today. I failed to mention at the beginning that we are taking questions from our viewers. So please use the chat function for any question that you may have. After this panel, there will be a Q&A for our keynote speaker, Karen, or any of our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. It's the first time I've ever done this in a mask. Thank you, Mr. Borough President. I remember back in the day standing with you at our Hostos Farmers Market, handing out health bucks soon after you first announced the Not 62 initiative. Karen, it's an honor. For 20 years, we've been having these conversations together, learning from you, mentoring from you, and being held accountable from you. So thank you and congratulations. Grow NYC's approach to food access is that access begins with availability. All of our programs are guided by a 2-part mission, and that's farmer profitability and that all New Yorkers have access to our regional farm products. Our region is about 200 miles within the city, and everything that we do goes towards achieving that 2-part mission. Whether it's our farmers markets, our retail markets, whether it's our youth-run farm stands or our adult-run farm stands, whether it's our fresh food box program or the emergency food box program that we initiated at the onset of COVID. It's to keep land out of the hands of developers and to recognize that consumers and farmers are not just interchangeable parts along the supply chain. There are partners. You just heard Dennis talk about community ownership. All of our sites are only as successful as the sense of ownership that those communities have of them, regardless of what type of program it is. Now, this has probably been the most challenging year we've ever had. And in the 13 years that I've been in this position, we've had Hurricane Irene wipe out farms, particularly in the Black Dirt region. We had Superstorm Sandy devastate communities here in New York. But those were isolated incidents that were devastating to the communities that felt that impact. But COVID is universal and it's global. And it brought with it a sense of unpredictability, of fear, not knowing what was going to happen from one day to the next, not knowing if we were going to be open and operating, if we were going to be safe if we were outside open and operating. We worked incredibly hard with the city and the state to be deemed essential. And what you've heard from the last 2 speakers, our staff that's on the ground and has been on the ground every day since March 8th are the most essential people I know, and I'm proud to have worked with them, to have learned by them. I stand in awe of them daily and what they've accomplished. We've been open all but 2 days since March 8th. We took 2 days off, a Monday and a Tuesday, so that we could reconfigure every one of our food access sites, so that we could ensure that community residents were going to come to the safest food retail option in the city, that our staff was protected and was safe. We were going to expect them to show up. And I will tell you, across the board and throughout leadership was on the ground from day one. If we were all going to be outside, we were going to create the safest place for our staff to be, and also for our farmers to be able to come into the city. And I'm incredibly proud what we have been able to do over these last 9 months. And I'm not gonna lie, I know that I live in Jackson Heights, which was once the epicenter of the epicenter. And I've seen what's happened around health of my neighbors, from both a personal personal health, as well as the economic devastation that's happened in this city. We operate, I'm going to talk about what we've done in the Bronx since COVID. We have 6 farmers markets that have operated here. Actually, this is my Bronx week. I spent yesterday in the rain at Lincoln Hospital, and then over at Fordham Plaza. I know when I say that, Karen's going to say, "Why didn't you call me and let me know that you were in the borough?" So I'll be in trouble after this. We have 3 farm stands. 2 actually are year-round, and we are going to establish a 3rd year-round farm stand in the Parkchester section for this winter. We have 2 fresh food box sites. One we opened in partnership with Montefiore this year, which will be a year-round site. We do not do, our markets and our sites have donated to Pantries. We do over about £1 million of donation to Pantries every year. But this past March, we realized that we needed to pivot with the extent of the new hunger that was in the city. And so we created an emergency food box program in partnership with the City of New York Department of Sanitation. And here in the Bronx, we were able to distribute 540,000 pounds through those emergency food boxes. Again, going back to our mission, we do not accept that seconds of the industrial food system is what should be donated to individuals. So we partnered with a 22 farm co-op in central New York, and we made sure that the billions of dollars that were being given out in emergency food was being siphoned here to build our regional economy. With the Nourish New York money, we made sure that Dennis talked about the lack of farmers of color and farm-owned, BIPOC-owned farms. 13% of our Nourish dollars went to BIPOC-owned farms. That's not even nearly enough. That's who we're drawing from, and again, wanted to ensure that the millions of dollars that are being spent now are being spent equitably and creating opportunities where they can and building our region's economy. So we'll get more into the future. Again, thank you for inviting us today. I'm looking forward to hearing the next speakers.
Thank you so much, Mike. So now shifting from the farmers to the farmers markets to the supermarkets, we have the pleasure of Frank Pimentel, board member of the National Supermarket Association, a trade association representing the interests of independent supermarket owners in New York and other urban cities throughout the East Coast, the Mid-Atlantic region, and Florida. The supermarkets represented are largely owned by members of the Latinx community and are mostly in areas considered food deserts where larger chain stores fled. Thank you, Frank, for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Mr. Borough President, thank you for hosting this event. It's my pleasure and honor to be here. And let me just say, Ms. Karen Washington, what an inspiration you are. It gives me a great pleasure to be here as you are the keynote speaker of this event. It makes me want to start growing stuff at home. So thank you for that. Let me just give you a little background. We have been here in the Bronx for over 10 years. We own and operate 2 stores in the South Bronx. And we really have been on the forefront of the challenges that are faced by Bronx residents with regards to diabetes and all the health issues that we face. And so early on, we really just committed ourselves to trying to engage the community and to see how we can better help the residents that we call our neighbors and our customers, right? And so we've tried to engage different entities and different nonprofits like City Harvest and Bronx Works. And we were recently granted the Get the Good Stuff program out of the Department of Health in one of our stores. So we're very excited about that. I can fill in a little bit more about what that program entails. And also with City Harvest, we've had a partnership for over close to about 10 years now, where we do shopping matters tours, where they invite clients, our customers from the community, and they do a walk around the store and really just kind of engage them and show them the benefits of buying a 5-pound bag of potatoes versus French fries out of the frozen case, right? And so that has been very successful. We've always done also food tasting, food sampling in our stores. I can tell you, kale is not one of my favorite vegetables, right? But thanks to City Harvest, they were able to develop a salad with tomatoes and watermelon that makes kale taste amazing. And so I even do it at home now. My wife, as you, Mr. Borough President, I'm trying to stay in good health, and the wife has taken the leadership role at home on that. And so I regularly consume kale, something that I never touched before, right? So I'm very excited about that. Obviously, this COVID period that we lived in, how challenging that was. We were on the front lines. We were on the ground floor of that. Thank you. We were really overwhelmed with the demand. It was so stressful, just trying to stay safe, keeping our employees safe, our families safe, social distancing, trying to provide for our community. It was a real challenge. We partner up with a few nonprofits to donate food, VIP being one of them, domestic violence nonprofit out of the South Bronx. Bronx Works was another one that we work closely with. What a challenge it was. And so we're thankful that we somewhat came out of that on the other side better for it, right? And so, it was the supply chain was probably one of our biggest challenges, where the demand, we realized how fragile that supply chain is, because the demand just far outpaced what we could get, our supplies, and we were short of help, deliveries. And I don't think it had anything to do with the production per se. It was more the processing and the logistics and the delivery of that. You could understand a factory, as we all saw in the news, a quarter of their employees contracted the COVID virus, and now all of a sudden the plant is closed. And so farmers have plenty of poultry to process, but there's nobody to process it. So we were faced with that challenge in how to provide basics to our community when there was not any supply. So that was very, very challenging. But again, I want to thank everybody for being here, and thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Now I will bring up another Frank. Frank Malte is the founder of the Bodega and Small Business Association, a trade and advocacy organization that represents 16,000 bodegas in New York City. He and his organization have been integral partners in the Don't Stress, Eat Fresh and Montefiore Healthy Bodega campaigns, working to help bodegas offer and market healthier products for their consumers. Thank you, Frank, for joining us.
Well, I want to say thank you to the Borough President for the declaration of the Food Justice Day, and everyone here that are our hero, the hero of our community. This was a very challenging time for the bodegas, especially for bodegas. First, the food distribution, it was hard. It was hard to get it. A lot of people that they dedicate to the distribute food, they was sick and they wasn't doing the delivery on time. That was the time that we had to be rushing, go early, make a line for us to gain some food, limited kind of food. But we, the bodegas, we always stay open. When the city shut the light off, we stay on. We work hard. We risk our health. We risk our family health. A lot of our members, they get sick. Some of them, they die. So it was a very tough challenger. My organization, myself, and some other members like Odulio Gonzalez, we went out there to distribute masks, and we gave over 100,000 masks to the store that we were operating, and we were telling them to keep the social distance, protect themselves, and protect our community. Even I want to say to our borough president, Ruben Diaz, he gave me some of the masks, which I distributed on the Bronx, Manhattan, some part of like Corona, Queens, because we as bodegas, the corner store, where we have to be providing the need of our community, the elder people, the mother. We even launched on that, what we call My Bodega Online. That was something intended to the people, for the community to all make the orders, so we can bring the food to the door without having any contact. Prevent especially the elderly and the mothers, so they cannot come outside, or they was scared to come outside with the kids. We bring the food. We don't have any contact with them. We called them. We was getting there, and we knock the door. We leave the food there, and we go back to the store. We protect using gloves and our masks. So it was a very tough. It was a very tough time for us, but we proved one more time that we prevails. We be very essential for our community. And I think that we, all of the bodegueros and the small business, we deserve better treatment from the authority, from the government. But we keep going. We when it comes to the healthy, we be working some healthy agencies, and especially we have what we call it healthy bodegas. What we be telling our members, we be teaching our members and telling to have more fruit, and to offer to our customer the option of what they can have. If they buy, let's say, like a bacon, egg, and cheese, so at least they have buy apples, bananas, water, just to be teaching them, letting them know how important it is to eat healthy, how the big problems that we have, being the worst both the health with the diabetes, high blood pressure, and obesity. So we be working on that. On my store, I tell the people the option of bacon, egg, and cheese, that is the most greasiest one, or having a turkey with lettuce and tomato. So, but it's a transition little by little that we gotta teach our community. And everybody should be doing like that to help the community to understand the benefit of eating healthy. And let me tell you something, the Bronx be learning to eat healthy, to eat better. We can see that in our store that the people, they are buying, even they are more expensive, but they are buying better product. So we're really happy as bodegueros that we can help to our community and try to teach our community how they can eat better. What we ask, if for any problems of this happen again, I hope that we don't have to face the same situation that we face it. So if you anything, just stay together, support each other. We need, because we have a tough future coming, and we got to understand the reality. We will need all of you to be giving out more food to the people. Our community, they are hungry, and they're gonna be facing tougher time. But we will prevail as a hard worker that we are, and we are a challenger taker. We will prevail, and working together, we will have our community doing better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frank, for those words. Just a quick reminder, we are going to take questions at the end of the panel for our keynote or any of our panel members, so please do submit those via the chat option. Last but certainly not least, we have Gladys Roman here with us. She comes with over 40 years of restaurant and food service experience. She currently serves as the executive director of the Manna of Life Ministries, where she has helped develop Manna on Wheels, delivering home-cooked meals to homebound adults. She will close with the final food distribution methodology, which are the pantries that became absolutely critical to address food security during our COVID pandemic. Thank you, Maria.
Good morning and thank you. I just feel so honored to be amongst people who care about feeding everyone. Manna of Life for the past 25 years has been serving the homeless and the food insecure in the Bronx. We started off as really two brothers who were concerned with the homeless who didn't have food, so they went out and they made sandwiches, and then after that we started and we had a small food pantry at our church, and then from there we started a mobile soup kitchen where we would go out and serve the community in the Hunts Point area, specifically the shelters. And then we grew, and then we grew, and we grew. When the COVID started, we were serving about 50 families a week, food pantry bags, and our focus was really the soup kitchen, was really going out into the community and having the community come to our soup kitchen to spend quality time with them. And the food pantry, we were focusing on helping people to eat healthier and really focus on spending quality time with them and teaching them. Now, COVID came around and we all know what happened. I'm very grateful that the first thing that we did was PPE for our volunteers who are mostly elderly, retirees, and PPE for the people that we served. And we went from 50 families a week to 300 families a week in no time, because the other pantries in the Bronx were closing down because so many pantry workers were getting sick. And so we were able to get some of their food and give it out. We were able to give out the food outside, not let anyone in. But the demand was so great, in spite of us getting this additional food, that now we had to do things a little bit differently. Whereas before we were focusing on giving out healthier food, now instead of giving somebody a tomato, which costs $1, it was better to give them a box of spaghetti, which costs $1. And so now all of the things that we had been teaching all along about the way they ate switched. Now we're giving out pasta and a jar of sauce. And we received, they say there was a pork shortage, but we had a lot of pork all the time. And one of the saddest days for me was the day that all we had was pork to give, and there was a long line. And I saw we have a lot of Muslims that come in and we feed them, and we always try to save other items other than pork. And that particular day, we didn't have one. And the mother looked at me and she said, "I'll take anything. Give me the pork." So now things have gotten a little bit better in terms of the funding. Right now, we're getting a good amount of food. One of the problems that we faced was when we were given all of this extra produce, in the beginning, they were sending us food that the produce didn't look good. It looked like they were sending us the worst of the barrel. And we all know that there are different grades of food. And the food that's sent to Great Neck, Long Island, which is an affluent area, the peppers that you buy there versus the peppers that you buy in our communities are very different. The peppers that I buy there, because I work out there, last me a week or even more. And the peppers that I buy in my neighborhood last me 2 days. And so this is a problem. So right now my pressure has been on the company that provides the produce for me. I want the same produce that you send Great Neck. I want the same food that you send to them. I don't want you to give me shelf-stable food that's going to expire in a month, because that means you're going and deliberately giving me, and this is deliberate. I'm sorry to say this because I've been in the food industry a long time, so I know how the food gets distributed. We get the lowest grade food here all the time. It's mind-boggling. We continue with 300 families a week. We also deliver food to families that are not able to get out. In the beginning, there were many, many elderly people who were afraid to go out. So we did like Mr. Frank, we delivered the food. Sometimes they couldn't go down the stairs. We were able to get hospital gowns so that the volunteers would go up the stairs. Those that could, some of our volunteers couldn't go up the stairs. We had a lot of undocumented families that were afraid to go out, and they don't even want to write their name on anything, and we don't require anything from them. They don't have to give me their name. And a lot of the undocumented lost their jobs, live in very crowded conditions, which we all know, and really needed extra food. So we try our best for those that really, really have no other way of getting food to give them a little bit more. We also try to teach our clients to find other sources, because we can't do it all for them. There's other places that they can get food, and we've been able to do that. And we're gonna continue, and I'm really, really proud to say that we now have a farm stand. And so now on every week when the clients come, when we give them a choice of different vegetables, of course the grapes and the corn go first and the celery goes last because everybody wants that. So I'm gonna figure out a way to encourage them to take one green, one red, one something else, so that they don't all, everybody doesn't go for the sweets. But it's a work in progress. We're gonna continue to try with all the limitations that we have. We bought a heater for outside. We bought a tent for outside. We're gonna try to continue to educate as we go along and as we learn, and to really give them the best foods that we can. We received a lot of food from the food bank, and we all know how the food bank works. Sometimes there's a lot of food, sometimes there isn't. We're grateful for whatever it is. And we love what we do. And we're very fortunate that none of our volunteers got sick. We gave out massive amounts of PPE. I don't know, it was just like it was raining PPE. In our case, we were very, very fortunate, and constantly teaching. And the last thing I want to say is that there was a shelter down the block from where we are, and it took months for them to get PPE. And I would ask the residents there, I said, where's your mask? Do they have masks? They said the workers inside have masks, but we don't. So we continue. We love what we do. I'm inspired by you. I'm inspired by you, by everyone here, and the love that we have. And really, there's enough food for everyone in this world. No one should ever be hungry. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Gladys. Thank you to all of our panelists for your encouraging words. On behalf of Montefiore, I'm honored to be here and moderate the panel. We do have a few questions that are coming in. The first comes from Khadija, and she's asking, I'm very interested in how we are all going to work together to tighten this system. So from the perspective of each of you representing a major food access system, how can we work to continue to tighten that system up so that farm to farmer's market to supermarket to bodega to pantry is a more seamless process, and we eliminate waste? And I think to Gladys's point, we address the issue of, you know, some of those unhealthier products that are now being put into this food distribution in an emergency circumstance. Would anyone like to take a stab at answering that question from our panelists or from our keynote? Karen?
Since today is Food Justice Day, it will be great to have a food justice department in the Borough President's office, so that there will be a consistent, cohesive chain of command, so that when people need, need food, that the bodegas, the farmers markets, the food pantries, there'll be one sort of institution, one organization that can handle that.
Thank you, Karen. Don't go too far, because this might be a, please, Mike.
So on the best day, about 2% of New Yorkers are purchasing food through Corbin Hill, Food Share, farm share or farmer's market, or going to Karen's community garden on a Tuesday to her farmer's market. And our goal is, man, if we can get that to from 2% to 4%, a huge economic impact, and what that means from access points and turning open space into vibrant centers of activity. But that means the other 96% are going through wholesale channels, right? Through supermarkets, through bodegas. And we are going to break ground on a distribution center, a food hub in the next month. Borough President has been supportive of this project here in Hunts Point, and it will be transformative. And it won't even be enough. I know there are conversations about having food hubs in central Brooklyn and in other parts of the city. That's what we need. We need committed infrastructure. There's nothing sexy about it, right? It's forklifts, it's cold storage, it's loading docks, and it's getting product from and creating efficiencies. You talked about supply chains. Dennis didn't have a supply chain problem over the winter except for yeast. And we'll talk about yeast, Dennis, because I'll tell you that when stores were empty with flour products, our grain stand our sales were up 400% at market. Dried beans and local grains, because we're talking about building the efficiencies and getting and doing that last mile distribution. And so having that infrastructure means it provides opportunities to get that product in from regional farms, to supply programs like ours, and then also to be able to get that at a supply and at a price point that puts money in farmers' pockets, but also allows these guys to be successful. So that's one way to do it.
Yeah, I know that Karen put the onus on the borough president's office, and I appreciate that. Over the last decade or so, we've been doing all that we can. But let's keep it real. The borough president's office, my office is limited in resources. That's number one. Number two is, for those of you who don't know, I am no longer running for re-election or any other office. Next year will be my last year. So if you read my mask, it says vote. I don't want to get too political here, but whenever you're speaking of resources, whenever you speak of respect, whenever you speak of something as I think is a great idea to have a food justice department, next year, guys, organize. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. And I think that this should be a topic of conversation for those who want to be mayor of the city of New York, for those that are running for city council, for those who are running for not only Bronx Borough President, but borough presidents all over the city. Because if you don't do it, I promise you that there are other people and other groups, rightfully so, with other issues who are going to put their issues on the line. And government can do whatever it wants to do. And the question becomes, how do they prioritize? They prioritize by where they see energy, by where they see organization, by where they see a coalition. And so how do you work together? I hate to say it, get a little bit more political. Vote.
Thank you, Mr. Borough President. Another question coming in: how can the community support each of you? How can a basic community member, the fundamental premise of #Not62 and the reason that it became a social media campaign was because we wanted to make sure that every individual, whether you were a grandmother raising your grandchildren, whether you worked in the Bronx but lived somewhere else, we wanted to give everyone an opportunity to be part of the solution and not just be contributing to the problem. So this is a really relevant question. How can basic community members that may not necessarily be connected or enfranchised support our efforts in the food access model and chain?
I'm sorry.
Sure, please.
I hate to monopolize. For those of you who are out there, if you have friends and neighbors, I was, and I have been on the ground since COVID hit. I'm telling you right now that our food industry in Hunts Point, the bodegueros, the supermarket, NSA, they have stepped up to the plate like you wouldn't believe. Whenever you see lines and lines of people who want food, and you see elected officials, we post giving out food, where do we get the food from? It's been when we contact them. So If nothing else, and somebody else will give you the technical, but the way you can begin is how we comport ourselves, how we behave, how we show our appreciation for the neighborhood bodeguero, for the neighborhood supermarket, for their employees. You know, these are folks who, for many, many years, people frowned upon and looked at them as expendable workers. And then here COVID comes and they're really essential. Like they said, they had to step it up. They had to deal with the complexities of distribution. They had to deal with the complexities of their own employees. But then they came and stepped up to the plate and took a loss on profit lines to give out food to non-for-profits, elected officials working with us so that we can feed people in the community, not just poor people, but working class people who lost their jobs, who never, ever, ever found or thought that they would find themselves on one of these lines. So how can you help? The first thing you start is by showing appreciation and reimagining and showing a level of support and love for your neighborhood bodeguero, and making sure that everybody in the neighborhood also contributes to that level of support. It is critical, it is important that they all feel like they are appreciated, like they are wanted, like they are needed, because they are.
To answer this question, I say familiarize yourself with your community and the pantries in your area. Learn to recognize the signs of hunger. If you look around and when you see families that have many, many children and they live in certain areas, and you can become more sensitive, find your local pantries and go in and ask them how how you can help them. Sometimes we can't get the food out quickly enough because with social distancing, we're very limited to how many people we can have in the room at a time. So it makes everything much more difficult. Donate your time, familiarize yourself with your pantries, familiarize yourself with areas that need extra help. There's so much that you can do in terms of especially volunteering your time and your money. A lot of times people think that in order to help a food pantry, if you bring them a few cans of food, that's going to do it. But you need money to pay the rent wherever you are, and you need so many other resources. So please get involved. Remember, hunger is violence on the body. Food is medicine. If we care about our brothers and sisters and we just look around, it's very easy to find a way to help.
Well said. Thank you, Gladys. And finally, one other pretty significant question. We have survived, thankfully, the bulk of this pandemic in outdoor settings due to the weather. How does the winter and the cold affect the food models that each of you represent? And how will we address that so that we continue to be safe as we deal with COVID-19?
It's interesting that you asked that question because 10 years ago when we started, there was no such thing as a winter share. I always facetiously went around stating that, all these programs ended at Thanksgiving, and that essentially what happens is since we were all obese in the low-income communities, there was no need for any winter programs. Now we have winter programs. For 9 years, we've been running a winter farm share. And the issue of supplies really has to do with two different kinds of things. For us, from a farm share perspective, what we're dealing with is the fact that we're dealing with a lot of root crops. And after a while, you get tired of cooking the root crops. The carrots and all the standard things. We like to include fruit in every share, and so it becomes apples, and exactly what kinds of apples. The other side of all of this is the fact that quite a number of we always talk about buying local and doing local, but almost 80% of all the food that's shared or served in the wintertime comes from the South to the large organizations. And what we're asking about the winter share is not that there's a problem getting food from the winter, but we're asking that many of these organizations that come up Route 90 might think of stopping off at the Black farmers and including them in terms of their supply chain, as opposed to the traditional way in which they operate, and that is, and I don't want to call any names, none of it comes from any of the Black farmers in the South. And so if we're going to talk about bringing things in from the South and we're going to talk about all of these environmental issues and so forth, I don't understand all of a sudden why Black folks and Black farmers in the South are not included in that supply chain. By the way, if I may take time, Karen, I just want to say very, very special kudos to you. You've inspired so many folks, you know, and I wouldn't be here were it not for your inspiration hearing you 10 years ago. And you need to know that.
Over the winter. So we have, go to our website. You'll see we have 26 farmers markets that operate year round. There are about 8 or 9 food box sites throughout 4 boroughs. They're not operating in Staten Island over the winter. And then we have our farm stands. There will be a couple farm stands in the Bronx and a couple in Brooklyn. And we will ensure those same safety measures are in place. We'll always say that being outside is a little bit of safer, although like the borough president said, go to your bodegas and go to your supermarkets. I know that I will be there as well. And one thing I just want to make a comment about, Frank, something you said before. I don't want to give out more, distribute more food. I'd like to see a program similar to like PEBT, so that instead of giving food away, there is money put in people's pockets that they can spend at your bodega, that they can spend at your supermarket, at Dennis's farm shares, at farmers markets. It's about, again, about building that regional economy, creating jobs, and keeping New York City going. And I know people out there like to say that we're dead and that we're anarchists, but New York is alive and well. I don't know, going outside yesterday in the Bronx, even in the rain, and what I'm going to do later today. This city is alive and well. Yes, there are people hurting and communities hurting, but it's amazing what we've been able to do. And I think that programs that actually give people buying power. I'm not saying that because don't come to my markets. Again, go to the supermarkets and go to the bodegas. But let's keep this city going. So thanks.
Please.
So just on the retail level, I am a minority. I live in the community. My daughter graduated from Fordham University. I'm a product of the public school system here in New York. I was not born in the United States, but I consider myself a New Yorker, right? And so I would encourage those farmers that are minority owned, that are Black, that are Latino. As a community, as a person who engages the community, I would welcome that. Any farmer or any entity that's minority owned, for me to sell their products in my store. And I know a lot of us operators would encourage that, because we are of the community. We are a minority too. We're not a big box operator. Our money stays in New York. We pay New York tax dollars, and we would encourage absolutely on that also.
Thank you so much. Just want to mention that Grow NYC and the Department of Health, New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, have resources for how to jar and freeze fresh produce for the winter. So another consideration for how we will address the winter. We did get another question in our chat, and the participant would like to know how can pantries be a bit nicer and more respectful for their clientele. And it is a valid question that we will answer.
First of all, I am so sorry that if anyone went to a pantry to pick up food and they were not treated with dignity and respect, it takes a lot for you to get up, get on a line and look for food. You are already down and out. And for someone who's going to give you the food to treat you with anything other than respect and dignity is unacceptable. This is a problem. It's even been a problem with us sometimes. I see that the volunteer may be a little bit stressed and I hear the tone of voice. I'm like, unacceptable. I would say to you to complain to the person in charge there. Make your voice heard. Just make a phone call or send an email. This is not acceptable. As a little girl, I was given food from a priest. And for the rest of my life, I thought to myself, he did it with such dignity and such kindness that I always want to go back and do it the same way. So crabbiness, nastiness is unacceptable. Report it. Because the only way we're going to change is if we voice and speak up. Thank you.
Thank you, Gladys. That concludes our panel. We are now transitioning to our awards recognition, and I'd like to bring up the Borough President and the Director of Health, Nancy Keck.
Thank you, Melissa. Once again, thank you to all of the panelists and the Botanical Garden, Montefiore, our steering committee for putting this together. Now this is the part of the program where not only today, but from now on, we should make this customary and we should make this the norm where we recognize the hard work, the labor of love, and the commitment of all of the organizations that are dealing with food justice and food insecurity, and just quite frankly are doing the divine work of feeding our neighbors. With that said, the first person that I would like to recognize and honor is Karen Washington with the Karen. So back in the early 80s, when Karen started gardening in empty lots, most Black folks in the Bronx were not interested in growing their own food. And it had a stigma that it was associated with the history of enslaved people and their forced labor. But over these nearly 4 decades, urban farming in the Bronx has evolved into a social movement to combat poverty and food insecurity and provide access to fresh fruits and vegetables in our most underserved communities. Urban farming has also become a vehicle of social and health empowerment and built community activism around food justice. Karen, you have changed the narrative on what it means to grow your own food and inspired the idea that growing food is a way to honor the knowledge of indigenous people and our ancestors who in essence fed and built this nation. Karen, you have cultivated many generations of community gardeners, and it is for this and your legacy and dedication and lifetime achievements that we proclaim, that I proclaim today, October 17, Food Justice Day, right here in the Boogie Down Bronx in your honor. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all. We are going to now read off the names of the 6 entities that are receiving citations from the Office of the Bronx Borough President. It gives me great pleasure to begin. We're going to do these in alphabetical order with the Bronx Community Farm Hub. Okay, Khadijah. In recognition of the Bronx Community Farm Hub and their call to action during the COVID pandemic, for coordinating and distributing the produce from their network of urban farms and community gardens and ensuring access to fresh fruits and vegetables for Bronx families. We commend you. Thank you. Next, we call up on behalf of the Bronx Food and Farm Tours, Melissa, In recognition of the Montefiore Health System and their support of the Bronx Food and Farm Tours, which is now in its 10th season, for highlighting the network of community gardens and farms while providing education, access to green space, and community engagement. As an anchor institution in the Bronx and a founding member of the Not 62 campaign for a healthier Bronx, Montefiore Health System is fully invested in improving health outcomes in the Bronx. Thank you. Mr. Derrick. Our next recipient is Corbin Hill. In recognition of Corbin Hill's magnanimous donation and distribution of food shares to families in underserved communities in the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Manhattan, we commend you. Thank you. There we go. Next, Grow NYC. In recognition of Grow NYC's dedicated support of local and regional farmers through their Green Market Network, and for bringing fresh fruits and vegetables to underserved communities across the Bronx and indeed across the city. Thank you for your work. Next, we have the New York Botanical Gardens' very own Bronx Green Up and the Edible Academy. Thank you. In recognition of New York Botanical Gardens, Bronx Green Up, and the Edible Academy for coordination and support of the Bronx Community Farm Hubs. They provide thousands of seedlings to jumpstart the growing season for fresh fruits and veggies for families in underserved communities of the Bronx, and we are grateful to them. And last, but certainly not least, for Mary Mitchell Family and Youth Center, Ms. Karen Washington will receive on their behalf, in recognition of the Mary Mitchell Family and Youth Center and their call to action during the COVID-19 pandemic. Particularly, we are highlighting the efforts of one individual, Ms. Lurgan Guzman, for organizing broad food distribution to ensure that food insecure families in her community had access to fresh fruits and produce. Thank you all. In this next component of our award ceremony, we are going to highlight the 18 gardens that comprise the Bronx Community Farm Hub. We are going to show images, photos of the members of those community gardens, and I'm going to read out their names in alphabetical order as they appear. Starting with our first garden that we are honoring with certificates of merit is the Bissell Gardens. They are found on Bissell Avenue. Number 2, the Black Joy Farm, 972 Simpson Street. Number 3, Brook Farm Youth Farm, Brook Park Youth Farm, my apologies, Brook Avenue and East 141st Street. Number 4, the Garden of Happiness, 2156 to 2160 Prospect Avenue. Number 5, Garden of Youth, located East 182nd Street and Prospect Avenue. Number 6, the James Baldwin Outdoor Learning Center at 600 West 248th Street. Next is Kelly Street Garden, 928 Kelly Street. Next is La Finca del Sur, 110 East 138th Street. Next is La Isla Youth Garden, or Isla. My Hispanic friends will correct that for me. 95 to 96 West 163rd Street. Next, La Casitas Community Garden at 1130 Woody Crest Avenue. Next is Morning Glory Garden, 1219 Hoe Avenue. And the Morris Campus Educational Farm at 1100 Boston Road. New Roots Community Farm, 630 Grand Concourse and East 153rd Street. Next is Padre Plaza Success Garden. Second, 231 St. Anne's Avenue. The Rivers Run Community Garden, 675 Co-op City Boulevard. Taqua Community Farm, 90 West 164th Street. Next is Urban Cultivated at Praxis Gardens, 4339 White Plains Road. And finally, last but certainly not least, Woody Crest Avenue Community Garden, 949 Woody Crest Avenue. Thank you all. We honor all of you. We're bringing up Ms. Maria Alcielo from Fidelis Care. She's going to announce the honors.
At Fidelis Care, our staff is mission-based and focused on truly getting to know our members in the neighborhoods where they live. Being so community-focused, we help our members find local resources that help them thrive, such as everyone that spoke here today. With that said, I'm happy to announce that Fidelis Care is donating $2,500 to the Mary Mitchell Center in support of the Community Farm Hub system, which is currently made up of 18 neighborhood gardens throughout the South and North Bronx, just as Nancy had mentioned. Thank you.
Last but not least, I want to recognize the members of the partner organizations of the #Not62 campaign for a healthier Bronx. We have begun this dialogue today. This was part 1 of our food justice webinar. There will be a part 2 and an ongoing effort to really highlight the work that all of you do towards bringing food access, fresh food, healthy foods to families in the Bronx. Our next webinar is going to be dedicated to a discussion of food policies and what our future holds as we move forward. We are not yet in a post-pandemic world, and so we are looking for another winter of some struggles and families who may or may not have access to good food, fresh food, and other healthy items that we need in our lives. We are grateful to all of you for participating. We also will be celebrating the 5th anniversary of the #Not62 campaign for a healthier Bronx in December, and we hope a continued dialogue on this very important topic. Thank you all for participating. We are grateful.